You are listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank, your partner in possible.
Hello and welcome into today's episode of KCS An Update. I'm Tucker Franklin, bringing you another day closer to the NFL Draft here in Kansas City, and I could not be happier to be joined by one of my favorite people to talk talk ball with, Brett Kollmann. You can find him on YouTube, Brett Kollmann. You can find him at Bootleg Football. And you've got a bunch of other things that you do, Brett. You've been doing a whole lot of stuff since we last talked. How are you doing? How's your off season going? Let's just catch up a little bit before we get into all this stuff.
Hold on, I'm gonna kill your retention. I work for the Chargers now, so everybody's just gonna click off right now. It's like, oh god. No, I still mainly do my own stuff, but the Chargers reached out. They're like, hey, we want to do film breakdown content. And we would love to have you come on and work with us as a side gig. So I started doing that. I do work with the NFL now, which, by the way, they sent me a note like a month ago, and they're like, NFL Films just gave us access to every game, all 22 back to 2002. What do you want to do?
Oh,
everything. So, yeah, we're going to have some wild film breakdowns going up on the NFL Throwback channel for the NFL coming up pretty soon here. Just because I don't think early to mid 2000s all 22 has ever been seen, so I'm gonna try to make as many of those as possible. And then we got the podcast, Bootleg Football Podcast. We're coming out to KC next week for the
yeah.
Lots going on.
There is always lots of irons in the fire when I'm talking to you, Brett. We're always working on something, just like us here at KCS, and we're going to have a good time at the draft. And you guys will be out at Holiday Distillery on the Sunday after the draft, too, for our draft party. Super excited. Everyone's invited to that, too, so everyone can come if you're listening to this podcast. Even you can come if you're listening to the podcast. So very excited for that to happen. But, Brett, I figured we'd catch up because we haven't talked draft in a while. I think the last time you and I talked was probably the end of beginning of free agency, about what the Chiefs will do at the wide receiver position, other stuff like that. And it's kind of funny that we're here now with a report about another wide receiver that the Chiefs could be interested in. And let's start with the Zay Flowers news. There's a podcast that Matt Lane, myself, and BJ Kissel did, kind of breaking down both the Zay Flowers news and the Broderick Jones visit. We broke them down both at the same time. Short little podcast. But I want to get your thoughts kind of on the situation in general and the Zay Flowers thing. It seems weird. Seems barely legal, if it is legal at all. That what the Chiefs are doing with sending Zay Flowers down to Texas to train with Patrick Mahomes. What are your thoughts on everything going on with that?
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. I was like, is there a rule like that?
Might be next.
I mean, it's the Chiefs. They're going to say, go ahead, fine us. We don't care. Like, we have Patrick Mahomes.
Right.
F off. But I think it's very much, we are now in the phase of the Patrick Mahomes era where nothing happens on that franchise without him saying yes.
Yep.
And so I think the front office loves Zay. I think the coaches love Zay. I think everybody loves Zay. I mean, he's my highest rated wide receiver in this class. We saw him live at Shrine Bowl. He blew everybody out of the water who was there, and there was a lot of good players there. It's pretty easy to see why, he's written down in pencil to the Patriots at 14. It has been for like 3 months now. But if they're going to move up that far to go get Zay, which would cost a lot, they're not going to do it without Patrick Mahomes saying, yes, go do it. So I think that's why they set that up, as they're like, Pat, we're not doing this without you saying that you need it. So
yeah,
if the workout went well, and I don't think we'll get any information on that. But if the workout went well and Mahomes says, go get me this guy, he's going to be my Antonio Brown, I wouldn't be surprised if they go do it because they just won a Super Bowl. They're playing with house money. I don't think they care about picks.
Right.
They care about, let's just, go get weapons and melt faces. And that trade would accomplish that.
Here's the thing, too. Chiefs have 10 picks in this draft. They're not going to make all 10 picks, considering that the draft class that they just hit on last year. They don't have enough room for 10 more guys to come onto the roster.
Hit everybody.
Right. So they're going to make a deal, whether that, probably thinking about a move for Zay Flowers. You got to start thinking about next year's picks too, because you're going to want some of the higher round picks. It's going to be like a first, a second, maybe a future second, to get up to kind of where they need to be. It's very interesting because the Chiefs do have a need at wide receiver still, I would say. The wide receiver room I don't think is necessarily complete. I'm curious to what your thoughts are, though, Brett. Zay is a very good athlete, very good wide receiver, but his skill set is kind of similar to what they already have with Kadarius Toney, Sky Moore. Are you concerned about that if they do want to move up? Is that a guy that you want to move up that has similar skill sets to what they already have on the roster? Or what's your thought about that composition of that room then there?
I think he's a better version of Kadarius Toney personally. Sure. Which, I mean, I wouldn't say no to having two Kadarius Toneys anyway, but I think he's a better version of that. I think he's a more complete receiver. I think, there's very few guys in this class that I could look at and be like, that's going to be a number one in the NFL. Zay's the closest thing to it. And I know he's not built like a prototypical number one because he's 183 pounds and he's like 5'10", but, in terms of the skills that he has to beat press, like he can play X receiver at 183 pounds because he could beat press. His drop issue was really more of a concentration drop, and a lot of it was on like side-to-side stuff like crossing routes where he just turned his eyes too quickly. Very fixable thing. Great route runner, great after the catch, great in the locker room. Did you guys get to talk to him when you were in?
Yeah, we did. We sat down with him. He said that he loves everything about football. We got the interview up on our YouTube channel. Make sure you go check that out. But yeah, I mean, great guy. When we got to talk to him, he seemed like he was liked by everybody there too. So I mean, that's also a very huge part of it.
Yeah, I think he and JSN are the two receivers in this class where it's like I don't have any problems. I don't have any worries about it. Like you could poke holes in almost everybody else, but you can't poke that many holes in these guys. Yeah. So I think if the Chiefs are just in, let's just get good players mode. We're picking 31, probably going to be picking in the 30s next year too. Like, let's just get good players. And if we need to give up like the 30th pick or the 32nd pick next year to go get a guy who we think has a good chance of leading this team in receiving as a rookie, who cares, right? Who cares?
Yeah. I don't think they're going to go full Les Snead on them. They're not going to F them picks, but I do think that, and Brett, we were kind of talking about this before we started the show, and something I brought up on yesterday's podcast too, if it's kind of a tinfoil hat thinking by me, looking at these guys that they're having meetings with and kind of seeing that they're all kind of in that same range above them and thinking, okay, are they preparing to move up already? Is that what kind of I mean, obviously these teams are going to do their homework. Brett Veach is going to do the homework because if it is a Trent McDuffie situation like it was last year, where Brett Veach straight up said, hey, we weren't expecting him to be there, but since he was, we went up and got him. If it's a situation like that where they don't expect a Broderick Jones, a guy that they came in and visit with the Chiefs, if they don't expect him to be there, but he is there, why not move up to 21, 22 if he is there to get what KCSN Draft Guide has as the number one offensive tackle in this draft. So there's a guy that could be available there, and I don't know what your thoughts are on the Chiefs wanting to move up. It kind of seems like I think I'm fully team move up for the Chiefs because you're not going to find a lot of, blue chip players at 31. So I'm team move up and see what they can kind of do because they've got a lot of draft capital. They don't necessarily need to make all of it. And being in Kansas City when the draft is going on in Kansas City, if they have a trade on day one with the packed house, that place is going to go nuts.
I think I'm team move up if it's for tackle or for receiver because I think that's a little bit more dire.
Yeah.
I'm team stay put if it's edge because you don't really need to move up in this class for edge. Like Felix Sanaduke-Uzama, local kid, he's going to be there at 31
for sure.
And he fits a need and he's a good player. And I'll tell you what, if they want a packed house to cheer a lot, you draft the K-State kid. Will McDonald's probably going to be there. Outside chance of BJ Ojolari. Like there's a ton of edge rushers. They're going to be there at 31. So they don't have to move up unless somehow, some way, like Lucas Van Ness slips. Sure.
Right.
I don't expect that to happen, but that's like the exception. But I think if it's, if we're going to get a tackle we think can start over Lucas Niang, fine. If we're getting a receiver that we think, can lead us in receiving as a rookie or at least be a heavy contributor as a rookie, fine. If we're looking for somebody to go hunt quarterbacks, if anything, I'd trade down from 31 and just stack it in the second round because that's where the real meat of this class is.
Well, Matty Lane has made this point on the draft show. I think he made it on the KC Lab the other day too. There's a lot of spagsy edges on day 2 of this draft. Like there's a lot of the depth of this edge class for Steve Spagnuolo specifically because Steve Spagnuolo has his type and he likes to stick to it. it's heavy in day two, day three. There's a lot of those guys that they can get on. So I think you're right there. Like I totally agree with you when it comes to if they're going to trade up, they got to do it for wide receiver. They got to do it for a tackle. And Broderick Jones, a guy that I mentioned earlier, they brought in. We had a podcast about it, but I think that if Broderick Jones is there, I would love to see the Chiefs trade up for him because I think that solves their offensive line problem a little bit more than what trading up for Zay Flowers would solve for the wide receiver room. In my opinion, I don't know about you, Brett. What are your thoughts on if the Chiefs were to trade up in between Broderick Jones and Zay Flowers for them?
So my number one thing is make sure Mahomes is protected because he's proven he can win a Super Bowl without a crazy good receiving core.
For sure.
And I know the team keeps saying, we believe in Lucas Niang. We believe in Lucas Niang. I don't believe in Lucas Niang. I don't. Yeah. So, like, of the two, I prioritize tackle. Even though I have Zay rated higher in terms of, like, overall grade, I prioritize tackle because Zay can get open as much as he wants. If Mahomes is bent in half by TJ Watt, it's not going to matter. So if they go up and get Broderick Jones, the thing I'd be curious about is, as a rookie, do they move him to right, or do they just keep Juwan at right? Which I know they signed Juwan to play left tackle. I know he wants to play left tackle. I get it. But would I want to mess with it when Broderick has already shown so much potential at left tackle? Yeah. Juwan's already been playing right tackle. He already got his money. Like, dude, you're making, how many millions a year? You got your paycheck. Move him back to right. Broderick at left. Interior is already amazing. We're good. That's something that I'd be curious to see how they approach it.
It's interesting too because it's not like they're paying 2 left tackle contracts right now, right? They only have a one. Even if they do draft Broderick Jones, that's not going to be a left tackle contract for a while, at least 5 years with the extra year. So I think they can get away with it. I know a lot of people will hesitate because of that, because of the contract they gave him. I believe he is the highest paid right tackle, but will become the highest paid right tackle if he is a right tackle. Pretty much middle of the road if he's a left tackle. When it comes to upper middle of the road. But we talked about that as well. As I think that too, if they do go out and draft Broderick Jones, I don't know if he played at a snap at right tackle at Georgia. So
at least not last year. I don't know about before that.
Right. So you're getting into a territory of where you're now flipping 2 guys when you could just keep them on the same side of the line that they're used to. Just kind of roll with that out. And wouldn't you want him next to Joe Thuney anyway? I mean that seems like the most logical path there.
Yeah, I mean, if you really want to keep him on the left, after you sign him to a big contract, I get it. At that point, who you want to trade up for is Darnell Wright.
Right. Yeah.
Which again, totally an option for the Chiefs. 100%. I wouldn't be surprised if he's on the radar too for a trade up because he ain't making it to 31. No. So either way, operation don't have Lucas Niang as day 1 starter. I think is crucial. And I would not be surprised if they agree with that.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm curious to see kind of just, I don't know, these 2 visits too are so interesting because they came on the last day. It's like if they had an idea of an inkling that they wanted to visit, they wanted to talk to these guys, don't you think they would have come before the last day? But I guess somebody has to visit on the last day, right? Yeah. There has to be a last visit somewhere around there, but very encouraged, I think, to see who the Chiefs have visited. Who they've talked to. They've talked to a lot of guys that, I'm a fan of, and a lot of guys that I would be happy with the Chiefs taking in round 1. But Brett, I want to get your thoughts. We're going to talk a little bit broader when it comes to the draft about what they're going to do at 31, what guys are there positionally and everything like that. And I want to get some of your favorite players in this draft and maybe some players that we're not really talking about quite yet that could see in day 2 specifically. So coming up after this break, Brett, we'll be right back and we'll talk a little bit more draft.
Whether you're a Chiefs, Royals, Sporting KC, KC Current, K-State, KU, or Mizzou fan, we've got you covered. Thanks for watching this production of KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
All right, folks, welcome back into KCSN Update. I'm Tucker Franklin, hanging out with Brett Kollmann of the Los Angeles Chargers. How does that feel? How does that feel to be introduced with your name, Brett?
No, enemy territory. I get it. I'm actually thinking about bringing my Chargers gear to wear to Holiday on Sunday. Just to piss
Oh
you off.
no! Oh no! You'd have a lot of upset Kansas Cityans at you. But no, I think it's one of those things. You talk about the Chargers rivalry. It's been a weird thing because like I've got a ton of respect for Herbert and a ton of respect for Brandon Staley, and there's been I haven't really beat the Chiefs all that often. So I mean, I think that there's it's like, oh, that's nice.
They are the one team other than the Bengals, and also weirdly the Colts, but that's totally different. They're a weird situation, but they're the one team that, again, other than the Bengals, that doesn't play the Chiefs scared.
Right. Yeah.
Like they match up well schematically. They match up well talent-wise. Feels like every game is tight. I was at the one in LA last year where Mahomes did his Mahomes thing in the last 4 minutes. And it was so funny because I was sitting down there in the lower bowl, a whole bunch of screaming Chargers fans. We look over to like the section next to us and it's a whole bunch of KC people. And, Mahomes got the ball in the last 4 minutes. Like they just looked completely unbothered. Like they knew exactly what was about to happen. But I feel like that kind of goes both ways because when Herbert gets the ball in the second half, Chiefs fans kind of know exactly what's about to happen. Like they're very interesting mirror images of each other in that way. It's just the Chiefs happen to win all the games. But I love that the Chargers always throw the kitchen sink at them, and they don't get rolled like a lot of other teams do.
It's been fun ever since Justin Herbert. Like even Justin Herbert's very first game started in extreme circumstances, obviously, but that game was very close. We got a visitor. There was always close games between the two teams, and that's what I like. I like the divisional games to be close, right? It's no fun beating the Broncos 15 straight times, I think it is.
Yeah.
It's no fun. You gotta have a little competition. But
also, when Herbert throws an absolute ridiculous dime with broken ribs, Ray Carter, Chiefs fans can go, "Oh, that's what that feels like to have that done against you." Okay, that sucks. I hate that.
Yeah, it's a little taste of the old medicine at that point. But Brett, let's talk about round one. We were talking about trading up and kind of some visits that they've had in round one. But what are your thoughts about the Chiefs of round one? I know we talked about offensive tackle, wide receiver, edge being one of those positions. And who do you kind of see the Chiefs, if they were to stay pat, kind of take? I know there's a lot of factors that go into that, like how the board falls and everything like that. But what are your general thoughts with the Chiefs at 31?
So, tackle is an interesting one because there is a shelf in this class.
For sure.
And the shelf falls off pretty quick after like the first top 5 to 7 guys, depending on how you up and grade it. I do think that there's a legitimate chance, again, if they're looking at right tackle, and then if you want it left, I think there's a legitimate chance that they're looking at the other Ohio State tackle, DeJuan Jones, who very much fits, the Andy Reid prototype of let's get the biggest, longest dude possible, who's just really hard to get around. I think Matthew Bergeron, if they're looking for somebody more athletic, is kind of a wild card at 31 there. Big fan of Bergeron. I would say the Oklahoma kid, Anton Harrison.
Yes.
Also somebody they could look at for sure. If we're looking at down the board tackles, again, because we know Andy absolutely loves length. I would say Wanya Morris, who I don't really know what round he's going to go in.
Yeah.
35.5-inch arms and you move like that, like you're going to go higher, people think. And if they just want to like a straight up project, Blake Freeland from BYU, just because he's an absolute freak of nature, has no idea what he's doing yet. And they would have to work on that. But if they want a project to double up with somebody who they think can play early, I think Blake Freeland in like 3rd or 4th round would be interesting.
Yeah, you mentioned that shelf, and every position has the fall offs, right? Those shelves of where they have. So I'm curious, like in the first round, what are you prioritizing there? We talked about earlier, the edge class is pretty good for Spags later on in the day. So maybe it is more tackle and wide receiver, but there could be some day 2 wide receivers that you like too, that could really fit into Andy Reid's offense. But kind of what are you prioritizing in the first round if you're the Chiefs?
I'm prioritizing not missing if I'm staying at 31, right? In particular, not missing at an expensive position, which would be edge, tackle, or receiver, because having 6 years matters. It really does.
Yeah.
the contract control that you get matters, especially as the Mahomes cap hit situation changes over time, which it will almost inevitably. Now, he's still probably going to be like the 9th highest paid quarterback by next offseason, but it's still something that has to be monitored as things get converted from year to year and they're moving money and they're pushing it back, all that kind of stuff. Like, they have to be cognizant of it. And so having contract control on a tackle, an edge, or a receiver for 6 years when you're taking, the 5th-year option plus, plus a franchise tag into account.
Yeah.
At 31, that's kind of the sweet spot for it, which is why teams trade up to the last couple picks in the first round all the time to get contract control at premium positions. So, I understand if quote unquote non-premium positions fall, like linebacker or running back or tight end even, and we're looking at that as an option, but like financially, it's almost irresponsible at 31 to not prioritize one of the top 5 most expensive positions in the game because you need that money. You inevitably need that money.
Yeah. That's interesting, and I do think that when you talk about offensive tackle, you mentioned some really good. Anton Harrison, I think, is a pretty solid pick there. There's not a lot of offensive tackles, I think, if they take him in the first round, that I would be too upset with, right? Like if there is even if they do trade up for a Broderick Jones, Darnell Wright, be happy with that. Anton Harrison would be a guy that has been mocked to the Chiefs several times. I've seen a lot of the mocks. I think even mocks here at KCSN, we've had Anton Harrison there. I think that's a safe pick. As you mentioned, it's safe. You get control, you get roster control, you get contract control, as you mentioned, and that's a guy, too, when you talk about the offensive line and the building of the structuring of that, you're going to have contracts come due when it comes to Creed Humphrey. You're going to have, Joe Tooney's got an out, I believe, after this year on his contract that can free up some space. But Trey Smith's contract's going to come due as well. So as much youth as you can get on that offensive front, especially with Patrick Mahomes coming up, the more protection for Mahomes, the better. So if you can get a good guy at 31 there and have some control for a while and some stability, I think that's enticing to me.
Yeah, and again, I think last year was the absolute proof of Tyreek's gone. Oh no, what are they going to do? Well, when the interior offensive line, when they completely nailed that rebuild and they got Creed and they got Trey and they brought in Joe and the tackles were just functional and you're giving Mahomes as much time as you possibly can, it almost doesn't matter who the receiver is. Now, they were having issues at tackle for a pretty significant chunk because I think Orlando did not play the way that he maybe believes he did. And Wiley absolutely was hit or miss. More miss in the beginning of the year, and then he came on strong in the end. But the fact that their interior was so strong meant that there was at least an anchor that Mahomes could rely on, right? He could step up away from the very frequent edge pressure. And he was still able to make it work with, Travis Kelce being his wide receiver 1 and probably his wide receiver 2 at the same time with one body. So yeah, I think last year proved that, like, you just give Pat a little bit of protection, little bit of stability, and he'll figure it out with whoever's on the field with him. And I think that's why he's already one of the 5 best quarterbacks ever, and he's been playing for like 6 years, because it's rare to find a guy that he can make it work with anybody.
For sure. I want to throw a scenario at you, okay? This position has been talked about a decent amount for the first round, somewhat, and I know there's some people that are going to get triggered by what position I'm going to say, but for the sake of the scenario, quarterbacks, there's not a run on quarterbacks. People think that they can wait on quarterbacks, wide receivers going early, tackles going early. There's maybe a Dalton Kincaid falls a little bit. Maybe a guy, Michael Mayer falls a little bit. What are your thoughts about the Chiefs entertaining the tight end position at 31, or even trading up for a tight end? I know that could trigger some people. I remember the last time, Brett, we were on a podcast, I suggested the Chiefs maybe could entertain trading Chris Jones. That people did not like that.
No, that's like the one guy you can't bring up.
People were not a fan of that one. But people do get a little upset when you talk about drafting a tight end in the first round. Not that he's going to replace Travis Kelce, but listen, Travis Kelce's not going to play forever. He's going to be, I believe, 34 next year. He's already setting concerts up and doing live appearances. He's making his way. He's paving the road for leaving football. I don't necessarily think it's a bad idea. Maybe not trade up for it, but stay at 31. And if a tight end falls, like Michael Mayer or Darnell Washington, maybe if he's there to take him and have a guy that can have a year or two behind Travis Kelce, and you can actually have a legit tight end too. What are your thoughts on maybe entertaining that a little bit?
The Chiefs are actually a good spot to look at this tight end class because, as we saw last year, they ran more 12 and 13 personnel than anybody else.
Right.
Like they love their tight ends, and that was kind of out of necessity a little bit because they didn't trust the receivers as much. But they had so much success with it that if they want to stick with that, but they want to get a different flavor of tight end than they already got, like Darnell Washington at 31, let's get a guy who can block the hell out of the run game because we know Travis has never really been his thing.
Yeah.
And so Darnell plays the Y, and we move Travis around, and he does Travis things like that would fit. Kincaid plays similarly to Travis. And he's a very common comp, even though they're not sized the same. He's a very common comp. I think that Kincaid, he's an interesting one because off pure tape, there's no way he's there at 31.
Yeah.
But when you consider the back injury and his age, I almost think there's no way he goes in the first round because of those two things. Now, if the medicals are better than what I've heard, then maybe he is a legit option at 31. But it's very rare that you hear somebody say, I used to have a bad back, right? And I think that might work against him a little bit. And I think he might slip to the second round because of that. It takes away nothing from him as a player. He's an amazing player.
Mm-hmm.
But back injuries scare me. And I know that his particular back injury has scared teams. So we'll see on that. If they take him at 31, I think that means their doctor said it was fine, which gives me a little bit more, it gives me a little bit more security about it. Yeah. But if he's there at 31 and they pass on him, that to me means there's something wrong there.
For sure. No, that's incredibly interesting because I keep thinking about tight end as like a position that they could really maybe Michael Mayer's a guy specifically who 5-star recruit. You don't want to overthink this one too much, right? 5-star recruit came into Notre Dame, played really well at Notre Dame with two tight ends that also made it to the NFL, and he looked like the best tight end on the field sometimes. So you don't really want to overthink it when it comes to Michael Mayer. I think he'll probably be gone before 31. But Brett, I'm curious, before we wrap up like pick 31, like before we start talking about those day 2 options, anyone that we have not talked about or position group that we have talked about at 31 that you think the Chiefs could have an eye on?
Ooh, that's really interesting. So in terms of interior defensive line, I think that will be a really interesting spot for Mozzie Smith.
Yeah.
From Michigan. Gives him a little bit different flavor. Shorter guy, but great length. Super stout against the run. I know people say he plays a little high, but when you look at his kind of like squatty potty stance he had at Michigan, which is something they do there, with that 4-point stance with the even feet, it's like, yeah, you're going to pop up when you're lined up like that. I think it's his pad level, which again, he's already naturally lower anyway. His pad level is very fixable by, I don't know, any NFL defensive line coach. So I'm not worried about that. But his ability to give the Chiefs a legitimate run-stopping option that can play shade nose, 2-eye, or 3 technique so that, Chris can kind of just do Chris things on the other side. He doesn't have to play really anywhere other than on the outside shoulder of the guard because you have Mozzie Smith. That's an invaluable thing to have. And it was one of the few weaknesses that they really had last year was for sure me in terms of, A-gap control in the run game. And I felt that they were almost entirely too dependent on, hey, Nick Bolton, please save us in the run game. And I would very much like to take pressure off of Nick Bolton to save the day every single time on 1st and 10 when inside zone is called. So, Mozzie Smith would make a lot of sense.
I like that a lot. The Chiefs have visited with Mozzie Smith as well. So that is a guy that they've done their homework on. He's a fun guy to watch on tape too. Be like a younger Derek Nottie, and if you can make Derek Nottie
built like Nottie, he's built like Nottie, but he's stronger.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that like if you can put Nadi, like if you're not relying on Nadi to be your one tech all the time, like that's a good spot to be in. Nadi did not have the best year of his career last year. Listen, they all can't be your best year. But he did not have his best year. He's coming back, but to have a little bit more depth on the interior defensive line, it'd be very interesting to look at. I don't know. I think Chiefs fans would be fine with Mozzie Smith from what I've heard about him. Everything that we've put out about Mozzie Smith, people are like, oh yeah, that's pretty good. But at that point, like at 31, you're BPA. You're taking best player available. You're trying to take a dude right there.
Yeah. My comp for him is DJ Reader. And if it becomes even 80% of DJ Reader,
fine.
He's worth the pick.
We will take it. I can't remember what the KCSN draft guide had him at, but I believe it was I think it was BJ Hill is what they had him at. But also, again, fine. I'll take it. But we know what we need to do right now, brothers. We need to take another break. Once we get back, we're going to be talking about these day 2 picks, 63, 95, and some options there, wide receivers, tight ends, edge rushers. So we'll be back right after this.
Whether you're a Chiefs, Royals, Sporting KC, KC Current, K-State, KU, or Mizzou fan, we've got you covered. Thanks for watching this production of KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
All right, welcome back into KCSN Update here, hanging out with Brett Kollmann. We're talking day 2 picks now. We were staying on the front half, the picks that everybody care about. That's what we're talking about here. Day 1, day 2. They've got pick 63 and pick number 95. You know a position we haven't talked a whole lot about, Brett? I'm going to let you guess. What do you think? Where do you think I'm going with this?
Backup quarterback?
Let's solve, dude. Blaine Gabbert, the truth. Missouri zone coming home, baby. We're going edge rusher. That's what we're doing. So 63, 95. What are some guys that you like kind of in that range for the Kansas City Chiefs there?
63 to 95, there's still a pretty good amount that's available. So this one I might get a little bit of pushback on because I think I'm higher on him than a lot of people. And also he is like so not a Spags edge, but that's why I kind of like him for KC because he's not a Spags edge. I mean, he doesn't turn like a battleship. So Nick Hampton from App State. Yeah, smaller guy. He's like 6'3", 240. Showed up on Bruce Feldman's freaks list. Is an absolute freak of nature. Highly productive pass rusher. Super twitchy. To me, he's like discount Nolan Smith. You know, if we don't get Nolan Smith, but we still want the lighter, bendier, quicker edge rusher who's like one job is to be a flamethrower off the edge. It's going to be Nick Hampton. He probably would only play on third downs as a rookie. He's not super great against the run, but, you know, Spags is going to have his arsenal of 6'5", Groot-looking edges to play on first down anyway. You know, let's roll Nick Hampton in on third down, put him right next to Chris Jones, and dare an offensive line to match speed for speed with those two guys. I love Nick Hampton. Again, he is so not the Chiefs type, but I think after all these years, maybe they should reassess what their type is.
That's kind of the same way I feel about Will McDonald. Like Will McDonald could be available at 31 for the Chiefs, and like you're right, and I fully admit this too. Like when I talk to Matt Lane, Kent Swanson about it, like I like Will McDonald, but they won't let themselves get like into Will McDonald because he doesn't fit. Let's not get attached. But I'm like, he's really fun to watch play football, and I think he would be fun if you like make different edge rushers, put different edge rushers with like a George Karlaftis and a Will McDonald next to each other. Like that would be pretty cool.
You're gonna get Isaiah Foskey or Zach Harrison. I like it. Damn it! Like that's your edge this year.
Yeah, Isaiah Foskey and George Karlaftis are incredibly similar. When you watch
same guy.
Yeah. It's wild. It's actually insane. But I was jotting down when we were in break. I was jotting down some day 2 tight ends that I also like. I know Sam Laporte is a guy from Iowa that people have talked about. See, it wouldn't shock me if they go day 2 tight end because I do think that there are some pretty decent tight ends there. Tucker Kraft again from South Dakota. Actually, when we talked to Delaney Walker at the Combine, who was the I think the NFL Legends lead for the tight end group, we talked to him, and he said he was most impressed with Tucker Kraft. That was his favorite tight end there at the group. So, you know, Delaney Walker, a guy stuck around for a while, UCM guy, and a guy who, you know, loves skiing. Fun fact about Delaney Walker, loves to just like alpine ski. Like that dude is just loves to get out on the slopes and hit the slopes. I would have never guessed that about Delaney Walker.
Well, when you got NFL money, you can actually afford to go skiing. So.
There you go. Very true. Let's talk about some wide receivers in this position here. So let's say the Chiefs do take a tackle with 31, which I kind of feel like is a natural kind of way for them to go, right? Take a tackle at 31. Looking at 63, 95, who are some of those wide receivers that you're looking? It's really hard to project this, right, at 63, 95, because there could be a run on wide receivers. It just depends on how the board falls, where the runs hit. And there's kind of, this class isn't as deep as it is and has been in years past. So what are your thoughts there for day 2?
At 63, again, I'm not entirely convinced he'll be there, but that's a pretty good spot for A.T. Perry. Again, if we're looking for size on the outside to play that X role, Cedric Tillman from Tennessee, I think is another one that would absolutely intrigue me there at 63. I think if they're looking for an inside guy and they just want to, again, just build an all-slot offense, because why not?
Yeah.
Parker Washington from Penn State would very much intrigue me there. Hands like glue, super tough over the middle, underrated yak guy. Reminds me a lot of Sterling Shepard. And again, they don't need a slot, but if they think that Kadarius can play outside, and they think that Moore can play outside, and they want somebody who's dedicated inside, I think Parker Washington is somebody that they would strongly look at 63.
Yeah, I like that too. Michael Wilson is a guy that I have recently learned. Problem with him, injuries, right?
Yeah.
He's had an injury, I believe, every year that he's been in college or something like that.
Yeah, that's the tough thing with him is he's the Jimmy Garoppolo of receiver prospects. You're just counting the days, right? Which is unfortunate.
Yeah, it is. He was healthy enough to put on a show at the Senior Bowl, but sometimes that's all it takes to get drafted is just be healthy enough for that weekend there. But some interesting options there. Wide receiver, I know Josh Downs is a guy that a lot of people like, kind of at 95, maybe later down in the draft. Ken Swanson likes Jalen Hyatt at 63. Who knows if Jalen Hyatt will be there at 63?
Better not be at 31. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. This wide receiver class is so interesting. When I just think about it, there's like JSN, as you talked about, JSN, Zay Flowers, they're going to be dudes. They're going to be guys. But then like after that, Quentin Johnson, I think, is a fun one. We saw him working out with the Chiefs. He'll probably be gone in the first round. If the Chiefs don't take him at 31 or trade up for him, he won't be there the next time they pick, unless they trade back up. But I think it's going to be one of those things where if you don't take a wide receiver, early or even trade up for a wide receiver, you kind of got to take one that's maybe later on in day 2. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I think day 2 is kind of like the strength of this receiver class. It really is. Like I think that's where like the depth really is. And I think it's because there's a lot of guys that if we're just stacking a big board with all positions, even if they're like, the 5th or 6th receiver, which in some classes would be a first round pick.
Right.
This year, there's a lot of tackles in front of them in like tier 1, a lot of edges, DTs, tight ends, quarterbacks, a couple running backs. Like all of a sudden you look at it and it's like, oh, that's like my 50th player, even though they're the 5th receiver. So that's why I think like Jalen Hyatt, 31, hell no. 63, you can talk me into that, right? Because I think there are some traits there that we like. And certainly, Pat can throw the ball over the mountains, and that fits well with what Jalen Hyatt does. But again, I think what I would prioritize with a quarterback like Mahomes is catch the ball. Catch the ball at weird angles, awkward angles, sideline toe tap ability. Because how the Chiefs win games is 3rd and 10, fourth quarter, down by 3, catch the freaking ball when Mahomes does some weird shit to run around and get it to you at a weird spot. You better be able to catch the ball because he's going to get it to you. And I think everybody always used to be like, oh, the Chiefs win games by bombing people in the second quarter and going deep to Tyreek. And it's like, yeah, they did 4 years ago. That's not how they do it now. They're very much a more ball control oriented offense that has some explosives in there, but they're very much more a ball control oriented offense. And they rely on efficiency more than explosiveness right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I would want receivers that play into that efficiency by catching the damn ball. That's why I prioritize Parker Washington. Because on 3rd and 10 against the Bills in the division round, if we need a guy to just catch the freaking ball, it's going to be him. So that's kind of how I would build around what Pat does at this point.
Love it. Brett, thank you for your time. Really appreciate you hanging out with us here at KCS and Update. Before I let you go, anyone that we didn't talk about that you want to kind of put out there that we could maybe come back and clip and be like, hey, look, Brett talked about this guy. When the Chiefs pick him at 63 or 95, we can come back and clip this and be like, yeah, Brett talked about him on this podcast. Go listen to it.
Jonathan Mingo, Ole Miss. I don't know if he's going to be there at 63, but if he is there at 63, that man is a Chief. Because we just talked about they're a ball control-oriented offense. If they want to introduce some explosiveness back in there, you go get Jonathan Mingo. If we want somebody who's like, let's go run the Tyreek high cross against cover 3 and get 30 yards for free, Jonathan Mingo, you are a Kansas City Chief.
Perfect. Great note to end on, Brett. As always, appreciate your time hanging out with us here at KCS and Update. Make sure, hey, if you're listening to this podcast and you live in the United States right now, you can go download the KCSN app. It's an app that you can get all of your favorite KC sports all in one place on your phone. Very exciting too. Great that we got that up going before the draft, because we're going to have a lot of content for you guys as the draft is in Kansas City. It's almost here, fellas. It's almost here. We're actually a week from today. From when you're listening to this podcast, a week from today will be the first round of the NFL draft. I'm so excited. I'm so excited for it to be in the city that I'm in. That's going to be a weird experience, Brett. Like, I know that, I don't know how many times you've been to drafts. I'm sure you've been to more than me. But, like, having it in the city
I've never been to the draft before.
Well, see, having it being in the city I live in is going to be a very weird experience.
I'm looking forward to it. I've never been to Kansas City. I heard they have a great Delta Lounge, so I'm looking forward to that. You know, we got an Airbnb with a speakeasy in the basement for our draft stream because, you know, in terms of brand fit, you know, speakeasy, it's hard to beat for us. You know, I land at like 11:30 on Tuesday night, and then I'm just going to be eating barbecue for the next 6 days. I'm happy.
Love it. I'm very excited for you to be in the city, for you to be inside of my city. I am very excited for it. So, going to be a very great time for the NFL draft, and we're going to have you covered here at KC Sports Network. Thank you all for listening to today's podcast. Make sure to like the podcast if you're watching the video on YouTube. Subscribe. Go subscribe to Brett's channel, the NFL Throwbacks channel. Great channel, by the way. Go subscribe to that. And you can subscribe to the Chargers if you want, but you don't really have to. You can support half of Brett's work.
Know your enemy, Tucker. Know your enemy.
Great point. All right, that's going to do it for me here. I'm Tucker Franklin. Thank you for listening to today's KCS Update. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks for watching this production of KC Sports Network, the fastest growing sports media network in Kansas City. Check out these videos that feature our team of more than 15 former players, insiders, and analysts bringing you the best Chiefs coverage you can find. Entertain, educate, inform. KC Sports Network.